Who would you rather have as a roommate, Paul or Luke?
Oh, that's a toughie. Oh, man.
Someone who sings lullabies in the high pitched, or what did Paul do?
He got whipped a lot. I don't know. I mean, if you had Luke around, you'd never have to go to the doctors. So you could, just free medical care. That'd be great.
The whole time?
Yeah, that'd be pretty groovy.
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool. Paul, Apostle of Christ was written and directed by Andrew Hyatt and stars Jim Caviezel, James Faulkner, and Olivier Martinez. And it follows the part of biblical history when Rome was burned down, the Christians are blamed, and a small Christian community resides trying to decide if they should leave or they should go. Luke, played by Jim Caviezel, visits Paul in prison for wisdom, but all he offers is to stay faithful and loving to all the people. It's a long stalemate kind of a movie of people trying to talk to each other and make terms with each other.
Yeah, it's a lot of people going back and forth between the same places over and over again.
Yeah.
We're going to go over here and talk, then we're going to go over here and talk, then we're going to go back to the original place and talk once more. That's not necessarily a bad thing as long as your characters are, good, can carry the scenes. And fortunately, these actors can carry the scenes, which is nice.
Yeah, definitely.
It's not as if you go to a movie like this expecting it to be happy-go-lucky, but man, was it depressing.
It's a period piece. It's a biblical story. So it is quite dialogue driven, and it kind of follows a scene by scene basis of characters talking to each other. What should we do? Then consult with other characters. What should we do?
Yeah.
And it has kind of the depressing point of Nero is in power,
right,
and Christians keep being burned up and thrown into the Lions Coliseum and everything like that.
Yeah.
And Paul gets beheaded at the end of the movie. Spoilers.
Yeah.
But,
if you want to be sad for 2 hours, I mean, it's a great movie for being sad for 2 hours. We were talking about the characters, and the characters are just so well acted, I think.
Yeah.
And this is Jim Caviezel's first role in a Christian film since Passion of the Christ.
Where he's not Jesus.
Right. Well, I mean, this is just his first role in a Christian film since then. I mean, he has never done another faith-based film since Passion of the Christ.
Yeah.
So, I mean, to see him come back and do that was kind of cool. And he got to speak English this time, which I'm sure was helpful instead of speaking Aramaic, but which is dead. So, however Mel Gibson figured out how to have people speak Aramaic in that movie.
He dug into the history, he dug into the books to revive it.
But I mean, just this character of Luke who's so humble and he has this ability to be a leader. It's like he doesn't want to take that mantle on yet, which I think is why he's going in there to get this last testament from Paul, because he wants that story to go out to the Christian communities. And he doesn't feel that he could write it himself. He needs to have it dictated to him.
Get the extra wisdom from Paul.
Right. Because, I mean, him and Paul walked all over that area for years.
They traveled thousands of miles.
Yeah. And then speaking of Paul, James Faulkner in the role of Paul.
Yeah. Play kind of the old wise guy with the big beard and
oh, man. You want to talk about wisdom. I mean, he
was
just
dripping with it.
Yeah, he radiated it. The actual character of him, it was so interesting to see this guy who's being persecuted, and his only thought is, in these last few days of his life is am I going to be forgiven for the horrible things that I did?
When he was Saul. And there are flashbacks, numerous flashbacks throughout the movie where he's thinking about his past life and he's dreaming about his past life as the persecutor of Christians.
And they show those events, and then we see a flashback to him doing those things. And there's one death that really seems to stick with him, and it's the death of this little girl. Because whenever he has visions of all the people he killed, she's always right there in front. So she's a major part of his flashbacks. He's always seeing her, and he just doesn't. It's like a test of his faith is him sitting in his cell alone when Luke has gone away for the night. He doesn't know if he's going to be forgiven.
That's true.
which is
or if Luke's going to survive,
or if Luke's going to survive when he eventually gets arrested too. But it's like is outwardly confident about his future after death, but alone, private. I mean, he's
as
not.
a human being. That's very hard to deal with.
He's just not okay with that.
Yeah,
he doesn't know anything, and I think that's a good parallel to humanity.
Exactly.
It's like we can say whatever we want about our faith.
We can feel like we're of such great faith, but we still need like the human connection. I mean, the spiritual connection is very important to us, but man was not made to be alone. Like it's not good for man to be alone, and so essentially,
Our third main character is Moridius. I don't remember how they said his name.
The prison keeper?
He was the prison keeper. It was an interesting choice. I think he played the character well. He had Roman features, very chiseled, kind of
the
pointed
sharp
face.
nose and everything.
Yeah. But it's just really weird to have him talking to his other friend who's a Roman, and the other friend has a British accent, and he has a French, Moroccan
kind of the mix of the different accents.
You know, and so it's like, are these guys both Romans? Well, they're clearly both in the Legion, but he was a very dynamic character, and a big subplot of the film is kind of his transition from being the kind of the
hardcore enforcer against Christianity to kind of being leaned into it by Paul when he's set free. There's
this great moment towards the end when he's having this final talk with Paul. Paul basically says to him, you know, I hope that the day will come where you'll be able to accept these teachings of Jesus as true, and he gets really choked up in like the second, but he doesn't let a tear fall because he's the tough Roman, and then he just kind of pats Paul on the back.
Like, I'll think about it on your way.
And it's the big shift. I guess a big catalyst for a shift is because his daughter is dying throughout the majority of the film.
And that's his main push as the character. He needs to make the change or lose his daughter, and then the other girl keeps coming at him like these things aren't working. Praying to the gods isn't working. You know, go to the Greek or something.
Because they show him praying to his Roman gods and making multiple sacrifices, pouring blood over himself, you know, sacrificing a goose at the altar of, I'm not sure,
the sun god.
That was just an altar to a bunch of gods, because there was figures everywhere. Very, very good depiction of ancient Roman sacrifice and
I
stuff.
I don't think I've seen that before in at least a Christian movie. So
no, a little bit of pagan sacrifice for your Christian movie, you know. But they show him, and he keeps praying to the gods, and he's not getting anything out of it. His daughter's still dying, and then he keeps being told by Paul to trust Luke to save his daughter, bring Luke in.
Yeah.
Luke's a physician; he knows his stuff. But he doesn't want Luke in there because he's a Christian, and he thinks that
it would anger the gods and bring this pagan, as they call him.
And then of course Luke shows up and doesn't use a single ounce of, you know, pagan magic or anything like that. He just uses his knowledge as a physician.
He just listens to the lungs. Oh, there's blood in there. I need to get into her and all that.
Right. And it worked out really well for everybody in the end, except for the Christians that
Paul
got tossed into the
and
circus.
The people in the Colosseum.
That wasn't great. There's probably two other characters that are fairly important, the characters of Priscilla and Aquila. There's a lot of testing of faith.
Yeah, on their part. Should they stay? Should they go? They send the one boy off, may God watch over him. He comes back beaten up, and they're even more upset by that.
Yeah. And he dies, you know, and so you have the wife who is drawn to stay in Rome and help the Christians there because that's what Jesus wanted them to do.
Exactly, to help the prostitutes and the beggars on the street.
And then you have Aquila who wants to get his people out so that hopefully once Nero is gone, they can come back and be able to do stuff. But, you know, they would basically be sacrificing the poor because they're the only ones that are helping the poor. So it's kind of a between a rock and a hard place situation.
It's a stalemate of a movie.
And they're a married couple, and they're being pulled in separate directions. So it's really difficult for them.
Yeah, it made for a very intriguing conflict, I think, throughout the whole thing.
Probably the best conflict in the movie, actually, because and almost the only bit of real conflict that goes throughout the whole film.
Yeah, a real difficulty of what are we going to do, who's going to give.
So just having this kind of different story in there is really good. A movie like this that's character-driven, you want to have good characters.
Yeah.
And they
yeah.
did.
And they did.
They had very good characters.
Uh-huh.
Strongest point of the movie, characters. Weakest point of the movie.
The pacing, a little bit of the writing, definitely
Yeah.
some of the writing. The movie's very dialogue driven. Well, the plot is character driven, but a lot of the scenes are dialogue driven. There's a lot of talking. There's a lot of two characters talking, and then they consult with other characters and they're talking, and it just goes scene to scene to scene to scene.
Right.
You start to feel the pacing. I don't think the movie's even 2 hours long, but you start to feel the length of the movie as it's kind of going along, and so as the second act is kind of rolling on, you're waiting for, can something happen? Can someone give? Can the third act come rolling along? And I think once the third act finally comes to grasp and everybody's actually moving around and the prison keeper is actually being leaned into it, then things actually start to get rolling, and I was much more satisfied with what was happening.
Yeah, I mean the third act definitely is much more, I mean, focused, I would say, because when it's the second act really, because the first act is okay, the third act is great, the second act is long. I guess when we're talking about pacing, it's like, do we really need the flashback sequence to have an entire track from the score play before it's over?
Right.
You know, it's just so long and drawn out.
I can understand the drawing out of the second act, as it's still like many tightropes out on the playing field and many tightropes connected to different characters, and it's all tight and it's all a lot of tension going on, and it's a matter of just waiting for someone to give and waiting for someone to make some kind of decision. But all that keeps going on is the people who the ropes are tied to, they're just moving here and there, and they're just talking and figuring out what's going on, and nothing gives until toward the end of the second act. But
right. The editing was okay. I mean, when we go from scene to scene, there's no confusion.
Not too much.
You know that you're going from scene to scene.
There's some really interesting cuts from one scene into into another in terms of geography, moving out of the way, and then the next scene comes in. Those kinds of wipes and smash cuts, as they're called.
Yeah.
There are plenty of clear transitions and really interesting ways of moving from one part of the story to a totally different part that we still need to, move into very smoothly.
Right.
It's very nice visually. There are a lot of really interesting angles in this movie where the focal point isn't like in the center or at the rule of thirds where they're supposed to be. They're like off to the side, or you're seeing like the crate, the trapdoor over the prison. It's like way off to the side in the frame, and you see Paul and Luke underneath it. And there are a lot of really interesting angles where that focal point is off center or off to the side and things like that.
Yeah, some of the angles were really interesting. Like, I mean, there's this whole bit when Paul is talking and the camera is looking at the side of his face. Like, perfect.
Exactly.
But his face is like towards the left side of the screen, like his nose is right on the edge of the screen, and it's like, okay, that's interesting.
It felt a little bit like Sherlock, the TV series, the way that they shoot that.
But I mean, in a character-driven film, you're definitely expecting a lot of close-ups on faces because they want you to get those emotions.
Exactly. If you're thinking about the character piece, and and I'm sure the director's whole objective was to get us centered on the characters and get us centered on where they are at the moment right there. I think it was a wise strategic choice to center the camera specifically at this place, or get into the character's head a little bit, or like, you're with this person right now, that's all that matters, and then you're with this person right now, that's all that matters.
One of the things I'm worst at is themes. But I think I have a theme for the movie. Forgiveness.
Definitely.
I think is a major theme.
Forgiveness,
of the film.
strength, perseverance.
Yeah. Paul's whole deal, we already talked about that, how Paul's whole deal is he doesn't know if he's going to be forgiven. Luke, one of the first things he does when he sees Paul is he forgiven for leaving him in Rome, alone, and coming back and finding him in prison again. Priscilla and Aquila, they're looking for forgiveness after the young boy dies. They're looking for, they don't know if they can forgive themselves for all the people who died under their watch. And then the same thing goes for Mauritius. He's kind of this character that's just kind of plopped into the story. And we're just like, he's been praying to his own gods and gets nothing, and then he invites in this Christian to do work on his daughter, and she gets better. Yeah. And so it's like there is a bit of forgiveness for him too.
That was a really interesting character change for him. I was pleased with that.
So he's able to not only believe that maybe he can be forgiven, maybe he doesn't believe in the Christian God, but maybe he has been forgiven by his own gods, but he's also been forgiven by his wife.
Yeah.
and I think he's also forgiven himself.
Yeah, it was a really good biblical period piece. Everything was well acted, everybody was well cast, the characters were quite intriguing, it had a very nice and strong conflict. I would go ahead and give it a B-.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with pretty much everything you said. Like I say, the only real criticism I have is pacing.
Yeah.
Pacing and just the choices with, the dialogue, just how...
It was poetic at times.
It was poetic, but it was like taking... It is a lot like poetry. It's taking a really long time to say something that didn't need a really long time to be said. It could have been... In some instances, it could have been shortened. And it would have been okay. Mm-hmm. I would probably give the film a solid B. Mm-hmm. Some of the things I really liked, of course, were the characters and just the actors that were chosen to portray them. I also really enjoyed the kind of overall production design of, from everything from the casting people who fit the roles. Mm-hmm.
Had the physicality,
who fit the roles, physically,
yes.
Who looked like they fit those roles. That makes a movie if you find the character believable, not just in their acting but also in the way they look. It's really helpful.
It is one of the main
and
points.
lets you be fully immersed in it.
Mm-hmm. Pretty well solid Christian movie. It's not like all the other mainstream ones out there, but just biblical period piece. What else can you expect from that? But pretty good to walk away from. Thank you very much for joining me, Kyle, and another review. Very good to have you in my videos again.
Woohoo!
We'll keep this on with more of your history knowledge and more biblical epics as they come along.
Yes.
So that's our talk on the movie. But until my next review, stay faithful to the movies.